When we think about intimacy, especially later in life, so many images come to mind. Some beautiful, some confusing, some quietly tucked away and never spoken of again. But what if I told you that intimacy, at its core, is not something that fades with age, but something that deepens? Not because our bodies work the same way, but because our hearts begin to crave something even richer: connection, presence, being truly seen, being gently touched, not just by hands, but by care, by curiosity, by memory. Let me take you to a moment. Evelyn and George. They've been married for 8 years. Last fall, Evelyn told me, "Our bodies don't move like they used to, but our love feels more intimate now than it did in our 20s. How? I asked. She smiled. Because now we pause. We look longer. We hold hands without hurrying. We lie next to each other just to listen to the rain. And when we touch, it's not about performance. It's about peace." That stayed with me, because for many, the idea of intimacy becomes tied to what the body can't do anymore. But what if the most important part was what the heart still can? Here's a truth we don't say out loud enough. Intimacy is not about age. It's about intention. It's not about youth. It's about presence. And as we grow older, the opportunity for intimacy becomes more precious. Because it's no longer rushed. It's no longer tangled in expectation. It becomes softer, slower, deeper. We begin to understand that a hand resting on your back, a laugh shared in the kitchen, a long gaze that says, "I still choose you," can mean as much, if not more, than any grand gesture. But many people over 70 begin to question, is this part of life still for me? Does intimacy still belong in my story? And my answer is, absolutely yes. Because intimacy is not just about physical closeness. It's about emotional connection. It's about feeling safe enough to be yourself, even as that self continues to change. It's about knowing that someone else sees you, not just the you that once was, but the you that is now. With your changed body, with your slowed pace, with your accumulated wisdom, and maybe your scars. And they don't turn away. They lean in. That is intimacy. It lives in moments of shared silence, in morning routines, in the soft exchange of, "Did you sleep okay?" And "I saved you the last piece." It doesn't require perfect health, or youthful energy, or anything other than willingness. The willingness to show up, to ask, "How are you really?" To say, "I miss us," to whisper, "I'd love to feel close again." Even saying that is intimate. Let's talk about different forms of intimacy, because it's not just about physical touch. There's emotional intimacy. When you talk openly about your fears, your joys, your memories. There's intellectual intimacy. When you explore ideas together, read the paper aloud, or discuss something you've both never quite figured out. There's spiritual intimacy. When you pray together, when you sit quietly in awe of something greater, when you bless the food, not just with words, but with shared gratitude. And yes, there's physical intimacy, but even that shifts with age. It becomes less about urgency and more about gentleness, about massage, about holding each other without pressure, about cuddling during a movie, about warming each other's feet under the blanket. These small gestures are not small. They are vital. They say, "I see you. I still want to share this space with you." So why does this matter so much, especially after 70? Because many seniors begin to feel invisible. Our culture tends to spotlight youth and passion, while forgetting that longing for connection doesn't age out. In fact, it often grows stronger after loss. after illness, after major life transitions. What many seniors long for most is not a perfect romance. It's simple closeness. And it is still possible. If you're watching this and thinking, but I haven't felt close to anyone in a long time, I want you to know you are not broken. You are not forgotten. And you are not too late. Whether you're in a long-term relationship or wondering if love will ever find you again, whether you've pulled away from touch out of fear or simply haven't known how to reconnect, there is room for you in this conversation, and there is so much more ahead than behind. So today, I invite you to do something small. Hold your own hand for a moment, not out of loneliness, but out of recognition. This hand has cooked, held others, written letters, built a life, and it still deserves to be held with love, yours, or someone else's, but gently, intentionally, and without apology. Let's keep going, because the next part might surprise you. It's time to unravel the myths that keep intimacy trapped in the past and free it to live fully in the now. Let's be honest, there are so many things we've been told, directly or quietly, about intimacy after 70. Some of them we absorbed from television or movies, some from the way our parents stopped touching in public, some from doctors who never brought it up again after a certain birthday. And many of those messages were myths, outdated, untrue, and in many cases, deeply harmful. So today, gently and without judgment, let's start to unlearn what no longer serves us. Let's name the most common myths about intimacy in later life and offer kinder, truer replacements. Myth number 1. Intimacy stops being important after a certain age. This belief is one of the most damaging. It suggests that intimacy is only for the young, that closeness, affection, even sensuality are tied to youth, to appearance, to vitality. But that's simply not true, and in fact, many people report deeper intimacy in later life. Why? Because we've stopped rushing. We've stopped trying to prove. We've learned how to listen, how to hold space, how to make small moments matter more than grand gestures. Intimacy doesn't disappear after 70. It matures. Myth number 2. If your body has changed, intimacy is no longer possible. Let's be real. Bodies do change. Skin softens, muscles weaken, energy shifts, hormones drop, and yes, sometimes health conditions or medications impact function. But none of that erases your ability to connect. None of that removes your right to feel wanted, held, or cherished. Intimacy isn't about performance. It's about presence, about creativity, about communication. And often, the most beautiful closeness happens because we've adapted. A slower pace, a warmer hand, a longer cuddle. These are not compromises. They are upgrades. Myth number 3. If you're not in a romantic relationship, intimacy isn't available to you. This one hurts the most because it leaves so many people, widows, widowers, divorced, single by choice, feeling like they've aged out of connection. But that's simply not true. Intimacy shows up in friendships, in family bonds, in shared meals, in walks with neighbors, in open-hearted conversations, in touch that says, "You matter to me." You don't need a partner to experience intimacy. You need presence, openness, willingness to let someone close, even if that someone is yourself. Myth number 4. Talking about intimacy at this age is inappropriate or shameful. For generations, this topic was taboo, especially for women, especially after midlife. But silence creates shame, and shame keeps people lonely, Let's say it clearly. There is nothing shameful about desiring connection. There is nothing inappropriate about wanting to be seen, touched, loved. And speaking it, honestly and gently, isn't crude. It's courageous. It opens doors. It heals silence that may have lasted decades. Myth number 5. Wanting intimacy means you're being selfish or unrealistic. No, no. And again, no. Intimacy is a human need, like food, like sleep, like touch. Desiring it doesn't mean you're needy. It means you're alive. You don't need to justify it, or explain it, or outgrow it. You are still allowed to want to be close. You are still allowed to enjoy feeling wanted. That's not unrealistic. That's deeply real. Myth number 6. If it hasn't happened by now, it never will. We've all sailed this one. This is just how life is now. I've missed my chance. It's too late. But I've seen otherwise. I've seen people in their 80s holding hands on a bench for the first time in years. I've seen 2 widows meet at a book club and build a companionship so gentle it made others weep. I've seen people discover connection through letters, phone calls, eye contact, years after they gave up hope. The only expiration date is the one we believe in. Myth number 7. Physical limitations make intimacy impossible. This one is especially cruel because, yes, arthritis, limited mobility, fatigue, these are real. But so is adaptability. Pillows, chairs, timing, creativity, laughter. Intimacy doesn't require ideal conditions. It requires trust. It requires being patient with yourself and your body. And most of all, it requires the courage to say, I still want to be close. Can we find a way together? Myth number 8. You should be over this by now. This one often comes from internalized voices, from cultural shame, from old religious dogma, from fear of being judged. But listen closely. You don't have to be over your desire for intimacy. You're not weak for still wanting touch. You're not immature for missing connection. You are simply human, still beating, still longing, still here. And here's something else that's rarely said. These myths don't just come from the outside world. They come from inside us, too, from the parts of ourselves that feel too tired to hope, from the grief we carry quietly, from the belief that settling is safer than wishing again. But you are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to say, maybe I want to try again. You are allowed to hope, even now. And if that hope feels small, or hesitant, or fragile, that's okay too. Hope doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be true. So let's start where we are, by telling the truth, by letting go of stories that don't serve us, and by daring to believe that intimacy can still meet us here, not in the past, but in the present. You are not too late. You are right on time. Let's pause for a moment and breathe. Because after unlearning the myths we've carried for years, maybe even decades, there's a gentle truth waiting to be heard. Your health, body, mind, and spirit is not a separate issue from intimacy. It is the ground where intimacy grows. And like any garden, it needs tending. Not perfection, not a flawless physique, but care, compassion, and a willingness to listen to what your body is saying now, not what it used to say. Let's begin with physical health. Many people assume that intimacy ends when the body begins to change, but really, that's when a new kind of intimacy begins. Because when you start paying attention to your energy, your breath, your digestion, your rest, something shifts. You move slower. You tune in. You touch more thoughtfully. You begin to partner with your body instead of pushing it. And when you feel more connected to your own body, you feel safer, allowing someone else to be close to it. That's where the foundation begins. Let's talk about energy. You don't need hours of stamina to enjoy closeness. You need energy that's steady, present. And that begins with small habits, hydrating more often, moving your body gently, maybe a short walk, some stretching, eating foods that don't drain you, resting not just at night, but throughout the day when needed. When your body feels supported, your nervous system softens, and that opens the door for connection. Because it's hard to feel desire or give presence when you're running on fumes. So take care of your energy like it matters, because it does. And what about pain or discomfort? Many seniors deal with joint pain, inflammation, stiffness. These aren't small things. They make even basic movement feel vulnerable. But that doesn't mean intimacy is gone. In fact, this is where communication becomes sacred. You can say, "My back hurts, so let's try something seated. I'd love to be close, but I may need breaks. Can you hold me this way instead?" These aren't signs of weakness. They're signs of trust. They say, "I still want to connect. Can we find a way that honors where I am now?" And most of the time, the answer is yes. Now let's explore emotional health. Intimacy begins in the body, but it grows in the mind. So ask yourself gently, how do I feel about being touched right now? What emotions come up when I think about closeness? Am I carrying fear, grief, shame, or old hurts that need space to breathe? You don't need to fix everything, but being aware of your emotional terrain helps you navigate intimacy with more compassion. Maybe there are wounds that need naming. Maybe there's a fear of being rejected. Maybe you're still mourning someone you lost, and the thought of closeness feels like betrayal. These are not reasons to avoid intimacy. They are reasons to approach it with tenderness, with yourself, and with others. And let's not forget mental clarity. Feeling mentally sharp, or at least grounded, makes intimacy safer and more mutual. If you've been feeling forgetful, foggy, or anxious, that's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to talk about. Sometimes that means checking in with your doctor. Sometimes it means getting better sleep, more daylight, or support from community. Mental wellness isn't about being perfect. It's about being present enough to enjoy connection and communicate clearly when you need something. Now let's talk about medications. Many seniors take daily medications for blood pressure, sleep, mood, chronic conditions, and some of these can affect intimacy. They may lower desire, dry the skin, cause fatigue, impact function. You are not imagining it, and you are not alone. The most important thing you can do, talk to your doctor, not with embarrassment, but with honesty. Say, "This part of life still matters to me. Can we adjust things so I can feel more connected again?" You deserve a doctor who hears that, because your health is not just about survival. It's about living well. And what about spiritual health? Yes, even that matters here. Because intimacy, at its core, is about being fully seen. And when you feel connected to something larger than yourself, God, nature, stillness, purpose, it softens the fear that often blocks closeness. It helps you say, "Even if my body is changing, I am still whole. Even if I don't look like I used to, I still deserve to be touched. Even if I'm afraid, I'm not doing this alone." Spiritual grounding offers safety, meaning, and gentleness. And all of those things are the soil of intimacy. So no, Health and intimacy are not separate. They dance together, and like any dance, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be in rhythm with your own truth. If you're tired, say so. If you're curious, explore. If you're ready, reach out. If you're unsure, breathe and wait. The body will tell you what it needs, and when you listen, it responds with presence, with softness, with possibility. So let's keep going, because the next part invites us to go even deeper. We've explored what's possible. Next, we'll gently walk into the real-life challenges: fear, change, grief, and how to overcome them with grace and courage. Let's take a breath together, because this part may feel tender. When we talk about intimacy after 70, it's easy to speak in ideals: connection, presence, possibility. But what about the hard parts? The things we don't post about, the questions we whisper, the moments we look in the mirror and wonder, am I even allowed to want this anymore? This part is for those quiet doubts, the ones that build walls around closeness, the ones that say, maybe it's just easier to live without it, but easier doesn't always mean better. Sometimes the path back to intimacy is the path back to ourselves. Barrier number 1, fear of rejection or embarrassment. This fear often begins quietly. What if they don't feel the same way? What if my body makes them uncomfortable? What if I try and it's awkward? It's a real fear, and it often grows with age. We become more aware of our scars, our surgeries, our stretch marks. We may have assistive devices, catheters, ostomies, hearing aids, and we think, who would want this version of me? But here's the truth. Intimacy isn't about impressing. It's about sharing. And someone who's worthy of your closeness will welcome all of you, not just the polished parts. Awkwardness is not failure. It's a sign that we're being honest. You don't need to be confident to be intimate. You just need to be willing. Barrier number 2, grief and loss. Many of us carry the loss of a partner, a spouse, a love that felt like home. And after that, the idea of new closeness can feel disloyal, like we're betraying someone or opening a door that should stay closed. But grief and love are not opposites. In fact, they live in the same room. Your ability to feel close again doesn't erase the love you've lost. It honors it, because it says, what we had was real, and love is still something I carry, even now. Letting someone hold your hand today doesn't mean you've let go of yesterday. It means you're still alive, and open, and healing. Barrier number 3, silence and inexperience. Some people say, I've been married for 40 years, and we've never talked about intimacy. Others say, I've never had a real intimate relationship. I wouldn't even know where to start. Silence can become a habit, and when something hasn't been spoken in decades, it can feel impossible to begin. But beginnings don't need to be perfect. You can say, I know we haven't talked about this much, but I'd like to. I'm not sure what I need, but I miss feeling close. Can we try something different, gently, solely, together? It doesn't have to be a speech, just a moment of truth. And that truth can become a bridge. Barrier number 4, body image and self-worth. We live in a culture that worships youth. So when our skin sags, our waistlines shift, our faces wrinkle, it's easy to feel like we've become invisible. Many older adults stop seeking closeness, not because they don't want it, but because they no longer feel worthy of being seen. That breaks my heart, because every wrinkle holds a story. Every stretch mark held life. Every scar speaks of survival, and anyone who gets close enough to touch you should be close enough to honor you. Your body is not a mistake. It is a map, and someone kind will want to read it, not with judgment, but with wonder. Barrier number 5, physical and medical changes. Let's not ignore the reality. There are medical issues that affect intimacy, chronic pain, dryness, erectile changes, medications, surgeries. These challenges are real, but they are not the end. They are invitations to shift, to adapt, to get creative. You can change positions, use pillows for support, explore non-sexual forms of intimacy, ask your doctor about safe options, focus on massage, touch, closeness, breathing. It's not about fixing anything. It's about choosing presence over pressure. There is still connection available, without expectation, without shame. Barrier number 6, the belief that it's too late. This may be the biggest wall of all, the quiet resignation, the story that says, that part of life is over for me. But let me ask you something. Do you still enjoy warmth, laughter, handwritten notes, music that makes your heart ache? Then no, it's not too late. Because intimacy isn't a performance, it's a presence. And presence is something you can return to at any age, even if it's been years, even if you're starting again, even if you feel afraid. Especially if you feel afraid. So how do we begin to tear down these walls? We start small, with one breath, one honest sentence, one curious touch, one prayer whispered in the dark. I want to feel close again. You don't need a plan, just permission. Permission to feel, permission to try, permission to want. And if you don't know where to begin, begin with yourself. Place your hand over your heart. Breathe in. Say, I am still worthy of a closeness. That's all. That's the first crack in the wall. So let's keep going. Because the final part of this journey isn't just about removing obstacles. It's about reclaiming joy and learning how to cultivate intimacy gently, practically, beautifully, right where you are. You've come a long way in this journey. You've heard the truth that intimacy doesn't fade, it evolves. You've unlearned myths that kept you silent. You've explored the links between your health and your capacity to connect. You've faced the walls, grief, shame, fear, and you're still here, still listening, still hopeful, still open. And now, maybe, you're wondering, so how do I begin again? The answer is not a to-do list. It's a gentle invitation to reawaken. And here are some real, practical ways to do just that. Tip number 1. Start with yourself. It sounds simple, but many of us skip this step. Place your hand on your chest. Take a breath. Ask, what do I long for right now? It might not be touch. It might be conversation, or closeness without words, or laughter, or being held emotionally, spiritually, physically. When you know what you long for, even quietly, you begin to move toward it. And that, by itself, is powerful. Tip number 2, create space for intimacy, literally. Sometimes we say we want connection, but our environment says otherwise. Create a space in your home, however small, that invites warmth. A chair where you sit together without screens. A lamp with soft light. A photo, a scent, a piece of music that reminds you of love. A blanket you share while you talk or sit. It doesn't have to be romantic. It just needs to feel safe. When space feels soft, we soften too. Tip number 3, relearn the language of touch. If it's been a while since you've reached for someone or allowed someone to reach for you, start with small gestures. A gentle hand on the arm during conversation, sitting a little closer, offering a shoulder massage, holding hands without words, brushing someone's hair, touch doesn't need to lead to anything. Touch is, by itself, a form of communication. And it says, I'm here. I still care. Tip number 4. Talk about it. Lightly, kindly. Many older adults feel awkward starting a conversation about intimacy. So start small. Try. I miss how close we used to feel. I wonder if there's a new way we could enjoy being near each other. Do you think we could try just sitting together more often? What makes you feel cared for these days? You're not demanding. You're inviting. And that's the difference between pressure and presence. Tip number 5, redefine intimacy. Maybe physical closeness isn't easy right now, but what else makes you feel connected? Sharing memories, laughing at old photos, cooking a meal together, listening to music side by side, and saying, I love you, in a way that's new. You get to decide what intimacy means now. You get to build your own version of closeness. Tip number 6, go slowly. You don't have to rush into deep emotional or physical vulnerability. Start with minutes, not hours. Start with a glance, not a grand gesture. Reconnection is a process, not an event. And like anything meaningful, it grows better with time and intention. Tip number 7, take care of your body with kindness. This isn't about looking young, it's about feeling well. Move in ways that feel good. Stay hydrated. Wear something that makes you feel at ease. Moisturize your skin, not for appearance, but for connection with yourself. Stretch, breathe, walk, even just a little, each day. The more comfortable you feel in your own skin, the easier it is to share that space with someone else. Tip number 8, let joy lead you. Don't let intimacy become a task. Let it become play. Flirt a little, leave a note, smile more. Tell a silly story from your youth. Send a song that makes you feel something. Joy is deeply intimate. And when you let joy lead, everything else feels lighter. Bonus tip. Be patient with yourself and with others. Not everyone moves at the same pace. You may feel ready before your partner does, or they may want more closeness before you're sure. Talk about it without judgment. Share where you are, what you hope for, what you fear, and give each other time. Love after 70 is not a race. It's a rhythm. One step at a time. One moment at a time. One brave whisper at a time. And if you're not in a relationship, this still matters. Many seniors rekindle intimacy through friendship, faith, touching their own heart and saying, I love you. Community conversations, letter writing, eye contact with someone who sees them. You are not excluded. You are not left behind. There are still ways for love to live in your life. So here we are, at the end of the video, but maybe the beginning of something new for you. You've listened, reflected, maybe cried, maybe hoped, maybe smiled. And if there's one thing to remember, it's this. You are still becoming. You are still capable of connection, and the door to intimacy is still open, right where you are. So take one small step today. Send a message. Speak your heart. Hold your own hand, or simply say out loud, I'm ready to feel again, because you deserve it, because it's not too late, because love still knows your name.